This, let me just say briefly about what I had a problem with the call last night from the AP. I got decent amount of grief of it on Twitter. I don't know. I mean, in the past, it's very apples and oranges. You can't really compare the Republican primary with the Democratic one. Although the Republican primary, Donald Trump was not the presumptive nominee until everybody dropped out. The day John Kasich dropped out was the day he became the presumptive nominee. But it's not exactly apples to apples because there's no super delegates. There's just unpledged delegates, and it's a little bit more difficult to know what the deal is. In 2008, on June 3rd, Barack Obama was hailed by the media as the presumptive nominee. That was after he had clinched a majority of the pledged delegates. Now, look, in my mind, I've always said the superdelegates, you should not count them. I've said this from day one, because the superdelegates are always going to vote in favor of, not every one of them, but en masse, the superdelegates are going to vote for the person who gets the most pledged delegates. Even though most of the people come from the establishment, even though they may have started off supporting Hillary Clinton, if Bernie Sanders were to get the most pledged delegates, I have no doubt that they would go along with this, because there would be a complete uproar from the Democratic Party. Okay? I mean, the Republicans fall in line more often, and they were afraid to do it with Trump. And I have said that from day one. And it's also why I think I've also disregarded when Bernie Sanders says we may convince the superdelegates to vote for us, even if we don't have the majority of pledged delegates. I've also thought that's bunk, too. I know why he says that. I'm in favor of him saying it if it just maintains his presence in the race, because I think there's value in that. And I can perfectly understand why, if you're a Hillary Clinton supporter, you may not want him to say that, because that gives him leverage. Even if you know it's not going to happen, it gives him some measure of leverage. And you don't want your candidate to give up leverage to anybody else. That's just the way politics work. But mine is a media critique. Supposedly, the AP went and interviewed some other superdelegates who have decided to announce, or at least commit to AP, that they're going to vote for Hillary Clinton. We don't know who these superdelegates are, right? These are anonymous sources who are superdelegates. There's no list. You can't go and find a list of those people anywhere, per se. As far as I know, I haven't seen one. But nevertheless, even if they announce publicly, they can switch their minds. Now, I happen to think that they would never do so based upon the pledged delegate totals. If it is clinched by one or the other that they will definitely get the majority of pledged delegates, I don't believe a superdelegate would switch their minds, or at least en masse it wouldn't happen. Now, before you tell me these are the rules, superdelegates count, yeah, I know that. But if you're going to be a stickler for the rules, the DNC has also said that the nomination is not awarded until the convention. Now, I happen to think that the idea of the media making this projection, i.e. that Hillary Clinton will get the majority of pledged delegates 18 hours before or 12 hours before the polls open, is irresponsible, because they would never call an election, a primary that's happening before the polls close or at the beginning of the day, just based on polls. So I just think it's irresponsible. I would have no problem with them doing it once the pledged delegates were clinched. They didn't do it for Barack Obama until it was clear that he had the majority of pledged delegates and she could not win. Could not. Not 98% chance, not 99% chance. Could not. Simply, it was over. Pledged delegates. Majority of them were going to go to Barack Obama. Now, it very well, and I would probably be willing to bet that it will happen to be the case, that Hillary Clinton will be in that position sometime around 8 p.m. tonight, 9 p.m. tonight, whenever it is. The vast majority of votes are counted. But I just think it was really, really inappropriate. And that's a media critique because they all were racing to just try and be the first there. It was embarrassing, in my opinion. We'll also talk about the upcoming primaries. I mean, look, Bernie Sanders has a extremely steep uphill climb. And if he doesn't quite make that climb, the question becomes, how is he best situated to get something out of Clinton? I mean, Barack Obama was named the presumptive nominee on June 3rd. I looked this up because everybody was sending me stuff. June 3rd, 2008. Hillary Clinton did not concede until June 7th or 8th, I believe it was. And if you look at the piece, I have it right here. June 3rd, 2008, ABC News. Senator Barack Obama achieved the 21-18 needed to clinch the Democratic nomination for president last night. Made history, so I guess it was on June 2nd, by becoming the first African-American. He was very gracious. The presumptive Democratic nominee locked up the nomination even before the votes were counted in the party's two final primaries in South Dakota and Montana last night. Now, as far as I can tell, nobody had called him the presumptive nominee before that. They just said this in retrospect. He went on easily to win Montana last night by a margin of 57% to Clinton's 42%, but Clinton snatched one last upset victory in South Dakota. Nevertheless, Obama picked up enough delegates from those states to pad his margin of victory and saw additional superdelegates to rally to his side. They go on to say, for her part, Clinton refused to concede the race tonight. I guess this was written at like 3 a.m. It's been a long campaign. I'll be making no decisions tonight. In the coming days, I'll consult with supporters and party leaders to determine how to move forward with the best interests of our party and our country, guiding my way. As supporters chanted, Denver, Denver. That was not a coincidence. Denver was the site of the Democratic convention to be held in August, not July. Clinton's campaign has indicated her willingness to challenge a Democratic Party ruling on Michigan and Florida's disputed delegates all the way to the Denver convention. A drastic option that would delay the party unity behind Obama. So this stuff happens. This is typical. And remember now, June 3rd, there were no more primaries to be held. 0. And that's when, it was June 2nd, I believe, that he clinched the pledged delegates. Lanny Davis. Okay, here we go. Clinton, as they talk about wrapping up this nomination, Clinton, however, may be trying to leverage her support for a place on the ticket as Obama's running mate. She was clearly trying to leverage her support. In fact, the odious Lanny Davis, longtime friend of Clinton's, I should say that odious is an adjective I added to this story, circulated a petition asking Obama to choose Clinton as his running mate. It went on and on. But this is the Clinton open to VP slot. This is the same piece. But today, Clinton trailing Obama and delegates with her campaign deeply in debt. Spent much of the afternoon calling major donors and supporters in a last-ditch effort to gauge her support. In other words, she was hoping to continue, but had run out of money. With only 31 pledged delegates at stake in Tuesday's final primary contest in Montana and South Dakota, the Obama campaign pressed uncommitted superdelegates Tuesday to announce their support before the polls close to allow him to merge as the party's nominee without the appearance of it all coming down to the superdelegates. I wonder why that would be. I wonder why that would be. In other words, prior to him being considered the presumptive nominee, he wanted the clinching of the pledged delegates to be the hammer that put him over the top. He didn't want the superdelegates to be seen coming in afterwards. And by calling the race last night, that's effectively what happened. There was a certain amount of pledged delegates, not clinched yet, maybe clinched at the end of today by the time you hear this, but that was my point. So there you have it. Clinton faced pressure to drop out of the race, but refused to leave until the last primary states voted. As I read from this ABC piece, with their phones have been burning up for months with the calls from candidates and former President Bill Clinton, many superdelegates were uncomfortable with their roles of potential kingmakers, right? In other words, yes, every campaign tries to sway the superdelegates, but in the end, they're not going to come out and support the person who didn't get the majority of delegates, pledged delegates. That's just the bottom line, folks. So everybody calm down. People need to be able to see some measure of nuance on both sides of this. All right. Hello, you. I'm Sam Seder. Looking for smart progressive talk that is occasionally amusing? Well, subscribe to our YouTube feed. Subscribe to our podcast. Like us on Facebook. And just generally enjoy us.